What is up, mortals? Welcome to part 5 season 3. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. Uraraka, I can explain. Explain what, Izuku? What? The fact that you've been lying to everyone all throughout our time at UA. After all we've been through, it hurts. It hurts that you couldn't have trusted us with this information. After the reveal of Izuku's symbiote over at Night Eye's agency. Needless to say, the reception from the UA students wasn't that great. Although Kirishima and Tsuyu were willing to listen to Izuku and forgive him considering the predicament they were in, Uraraka wasn't so willing to hear from Izuku. She wasn't mad. No, she was disappointed in Izuku. This was something that hurt Izuku more than almost anything else. She was one of his closest friends, and he knew that it was wrong of him to not trust her with his secret. It was only a couple hours after the UA students were given their symbiotes and so much happened. Izuku was frustrated. Night Eye informed the students that they didn't have a lot of time to get accustomed to the symbiotes they just got. The next day they would be formed into groups in order to fight off the Shy Hasekai and capture them. Not only the Hasekai, but hopefully take account for the League of Villains as well. Night Eye had to change a couple of things around, but he was able to make a good amount of groups who could work well together in order to fight off the stronger members of the Yakuza. Weaker members of the Yakuza who didn't have really special quirks either weren't as much of a concern. The only problem was with Izuku's team. In Izuku's team, he would have Mirio, himself, and the other UA students. Izuku had the most experience with his symbiote, so he hoped that Izuku would be able to lead the group of symbiote users and learning how to use them properly throughout the raid. Uraraka was problematic, to say the least, considering her behavior at the time. He could only hope that this wouldn't interfere with the mission. He had gotten news about Shigaraki's upgrades as well, which made the importance of them working together highly important. He realized something though. If they really wanted to increase the success rate of this mission and the extra symbiote hosts didn't work out, they would have to increase the firepower that Izuku had with Venom. These symbiotes were apparently able to bond with pretty much any and all organic life forms. Something All Might informed him about a while back after the USJ incident was how he even bonded with Venom at one point. The symbiote was able to heal the blonde to an extent, but it was also able to seemingly copy his quirk to an extent and modify it. He found this to be interesting. He held on to that information for a while, but he didn't know what to do with it until now. Mirio, bring Midoriya back to the room for a second. I want him to do something really quickly. Once Mirio brought Izuku back to the room, the green-haired boy was understandably confused. He didn't know what else Night Eye wanted with him. Not even Mirio knew. He just did what he was told. Midoriya, I'm sure you're wondering why I brought you back to the room, and the simple reason for that is because of your symbiote's ability to copy and modify the powers of those they bond with. In case the symbiote team doesn't work out too well, I at least want to have someone to combat Shigaraki, as I find him to be the biggest threat now that Overhaul no longer has Eri in captivity. What are you implying here, Night Eye? Night Eye walked up closer to Izuku and looked him dead in the eyes. He rested his hand on Izuku's shoulder and began to speak again. Very simple, really. I want to abuse that power for a second. Have Venom bond with a couple of the heroes in this room in order to gain variants of their powers so you can have a better chance of defeating Shigaraki. That's not exactly how it works. Venom would also gain the memories of all the people he would temporarily bond with. Oh, wonderful. That means he would gain a lot of experience very quickly. I'm guessing you refer to that ability as genetic memory or something of the sorts. Yeah. Perfect. So choose any heroes you would want Venom to bond with and we'll be on our way. Izuku looked at Night Eye hesitantly. He didn't know how bad this would affect Venom's psyche. He didn't even know if Venom would go along with. I'll do it. Before Izuku could even fully comprehend what Venom just said, the symbiote slid off Izuku's body and found himself on the boardroom table. The symbiote looked around for a second before they latched onto one of the heroes. Vukiyu was the heroine's name. Venom quickly bonded with the woman before she could realize and resist. Just as quickly as the symbiote completely enveloped her, they bounced off of her and went to the next hero in the room, Aizawa. Aizawa saw Venom from a mile away, but he didn't do anything to resist. This process was important in his eyes. They couldn't afford for the League of Villains and Yakuza to grow any stronger than they had now, especially when it came to Shigaraki and Overhaul. After Venom temporarily bonded with Aizawa, they trudged back to Izuku. Night Eye was a bit surprised at the fact the sentient Inkai substance only bonded with 2 heroes out of a whole group and almost requested for the symbiote to bond with more. But this was when Izuku spoke up. Venom said that they knew most of the heroes in the room and what their quirks were like. The other heroes here didn't seem to have any quirks that would really benefit us in our advancements towards the raid. At best, if there were any Namu, we could temporarily bond with them during the raid and boost our stats more. Night Eye clenched his jaw but waved it off. Izuku left to go find Uraraka, but he couldn't find her. He sighed in frustration and left the building. He went back to the dorms and immediately went to his room. He couldn't sleep. He curled up in a ball and grabbed his head. Stress, frustration, sadness, post-traumatic stress disorder. A sudden flood of memories that weren't his. He internally screamed. Everything went dark after a good amount of hours. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called We The Celestial Naruto What If. We The Celestial Naruto What If mainly focuses on our Naruto What If series. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. 8 a.m. You could see several heroes in front of a police station. They were partaking in a co-opus mission in order to slay the beasts known as the Yakuza and the League of Villains. Izuku was among this group. Not just him though. Tsuyu, Kirishima, and Uraraka were also among this group that were gathered today. Kirishima showed visible excitement for the mission. Tsuyu voiced her concerns about the mission. Ryukyu did the best she could to comfort the aquatic-based quirk user. Uraraka had her arms folded and was tapping her foot impatiently. Izuku was looking down at the ground. He was nodding off. He couldn't sleep again and there were bags under his eyes. Shigaraki was informed of the recent movements of the heroes and all he did was laugh. He, alongside the rest of the League of Villains, were in the Shai Hasekai HQ. He had dethroned Overhaul through some gruesome methods and had to show a little dominance towards the loyal subordinates of Overhaul. He figured what better way to do that than to use the man's own power. They were terrified of Shigaraki and they had all right to be afraid. He grinned maliciously and already thought about how he would go about this. 8:30 a.m. The heroes and police stood outside the headquarters of the Shai Hasekai. One of the police officers went to press the intercom and read the warrant. But a large muscular man wearing a tank top, jeans, and a plague mask bashed open the gates which sent a couple of the police flying. Tsuyu was enveloped by her symbiote and they used their tendrils to catch the police force members. She safely brought them back to the ground and she glared at the behemoth. Once the heroes realized that Chisaki hadn't appeared yet, they figured he was probably in the basement or further down in the headquarters. They charged in and split up to fight some of the villains. Nine specifically ordered for the symbiote quartet to stick together throughout this time. They found an obstacle when they made it to the basement. It was a wall, but Mirio, Deku, and Kirishima used their enhanced strength to shatter the wall. The pathway afterwards was distorted. It was constantly warping. Suddenly, the floor they stood upon opened up from underneath the crew. Just like that, they all fell down one floor. Some were able to land on their feet while others weren't so lucky. In Izuku's case, something surprising happened. A pair of large red and black draconic wings popped out of Venom's back which allowed Izuku to hover above the ground. A couple of the students groaned due to the fall damage, but forced themselves up. Izuku was surprised himself about what happened and wondered why he was so high up off the ground. Everyone looked around to see where they were now. They heard footsteps and some muttering. They looked in front of them to see 3 men in suits approach them. They introduced themselves as members of the 8 Bullets. Fat Gum, upon hearing their introduction, got into a fighting stance. Tamaki stretched his hand out in front of Fat Gum which confused the hero. What was Tamaki trying to do? Let me handle this, Fat Gum. I can take them. This was a shock to Fat Gum. Tamaki was never a go-getter. He always struggled with his confidence. He could tell from the first day he met the elf-eared boy. His posture, his words, the look in his eyes. It was that of a completely different person. What had gotten into him, in reality? Tamaki was still suffering from confidence issues right now, but he was making an attempt to combat it, especially now. He remembered when he was younger. Mirio, his best friend, the boy who accepted him for who he was and always encouraged him to strive to do his best. He had even given him a saying to go by in these sort of stressful situations. Believe in the Mirio that believes in you. He chanted this little saying to himself as he went to fight the 3 villains and give the other heroes more time to combat Overhaul. Well, that was their plan anyways. They had no idea what was in store for them. Overhaul may have been dead, but Shigaraki was more powerful than ever. Before the rest of the heroes left, Aizawa used his erasure quirk in order to deactivate the quirks of the 3 men. Izuku also shot 3 webs at each of the Yakuza members which would at least slow down their movements for a little bit. He could feel his lack of sleep getting to him. He was going in and out of blacking out. Izuku's movements were also getting sluggish. He almost crashed into the wall when he tried to fly down and accompany his fellow associates. Kirishima was still concerned for Tamaki though. A small part of his symbiote separated from the rest of the body and slid over to Tamaki. Once the 8 Bullet members broke free of their restraints and had the activation of their quirks brought back to them, they charged at Tamaki. He was doing well for a while, But things became troublesome when one of the members literally began to eat away at his tentacle arms. After that, he was being pushed against a corner. He ended up getting pinned up against a wall thanks to the crystallization quirk of one of the 8 bullet members. Heroes like you will never understand the worth Shigaraki gave to us. Shigaraki, I thought you said Overhaul was the one to give you all worth. Tamaki was confused by this sudden change of names used by the man. He was just praising Overhaul for giving them all worth. But then he switched the praises to Shigaraki for some reason. Alright, when the man was about to finish him off, he noticed 2 things that piqued his curiosity. Number 1, there was a hole seemingly drilled into the man's head, and number 2, a yellowish substance encapsulated itself onto the villain. Their movements became halted towards him. They were now focused on fighting the substance that was trying to cover them. It seemed to be a fight for control. But whatever this thing was, Tamaki was glad it spared him a couple of seconds to break free and use the man's own quirk against him. Tamaki swung his crystallized chicken leg at the distracted Hojo, which also ended up sending the grown man flying back. This kick had enough force to cause Hojo to crash into his teammates and barely slow in momentum. Every single one of them crashed into the wall. Tamaki walked over to them. He was panting in exhaustion, but he did it. He was proud of himself. He made a tentacle arm to wrap around the 3 8 Bullets members and released a small dosage of poison that paralyzed the men. Before leaving, Tamaki removed their masks and brought up bonds. Tamaki clutched his arm and dragged himself away. He could only hope that the others were able to escape safely. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it out before his wounds overcame him. He fell unconscious. But the last thing he remembered seeing was a yellowish face with weird-shaped eyes. Before he could say anything, he blacked out. While this happened, Kirishima was also in the middle of his own fight. The whole time he was concerned for Tamaki despite Fat Gum's reassurance. It didn't help that Izuku also mentioned his worries for the elder student. Tsuyu and Ochako expressed visible concern for Tamaki, but there was nothing they could do right now. Currently, Kirishima was in the middle of a fight against a strong, muscular man known as Rappa. He wasn't using the symbiote given to him just yet. He wanted to see how far he could get without anyone's help right now. He couldn't afford to always rely on others, or else everything he did to get here would have been pointless. Kirishima was in his unbreakable form. He was trying to tank hits from this man, but the rapid punches were comparable to bullets. He could feel every one of this man's punches, and it started to chip away at his defenses. Kirishima was thrown back with enough force to crash into the wall. You want to know something? I find fighting with weapons to be pathetic. It's so boring because they can just end a fight in a matter of seconds. Where's the fun in that? You want to know what a real fight is like, kid? A real fight is when you use your own potential and strength to win. Fat Gum wasn't listening to what Rappa said. He was worried for Kirishima. He checked on the boy to see if he wasn't in any critical condition. If he was, he would be taking him out of the fight regardless of what the boy said. Kirishima groaned while pulling himself out of the wall. Thanks to his unbreakable form, he was able to mitigate the damage done, but he still found his arms to be bleeding. They were healing though. He realized that this was the symbiotes doing here. He didn't want their help, but Phage berated him for not wanting any help against a strong opponent they were barely able to match. Kirishima ignored the symbiote and went back to tackle Rappa. He stopped though when he saw Fat Gum turn to fight Rappa. But a barrier suddenly appeared in front of Rappa. Rappa expressed his dismay when he saw the barrier surround him. Another one of the Yakuza members appeared. He was introduced as Tengai, the 5th member of the 8 Bullets. Tengai mentioned how Fat Gum and Red Riot had quirks which seemed to excel in terms of defense. He brought up his disappointment in Rappa before they released the barrier. It seemed like everything they said though went through one ear and out the other for Rappa as he immediately went back on the offensive. While this went on, Izuku, Uraraka, and Tsuyu were going through their own set of trouble with the man known by the alias Mimic who kept warping the passageways, making it difficult to make their way through. Mirio was able to use his phasing abilities in order to make his way through though, and he eventually ended up finding Chisaki and Chrono. Mirio glared at the man in the plague mask. Chisaki turned to face Mirio and expressed his shock to see the boy made it this far. He was honestly expecting someone like Izuku to be here instead. But he would do. Something was off about Overhaul to Mirio though. His mannerisms were completely different from the last time they met, and all the information he was given about the man contradicted how he acted at the moment. Chisaki slammed his hand down on the ground and caused several spikes to form. Mirio managed to either dodge or phase through most of these spikes. But suddenly his movements became sluggish. He was confused. He didn't know why his balance was so hazy now. Of all times, why now? He didn't know what was going on. He powered himself up with One for All in hopes of countering this sluggish movement of his. He charged at the man he thought to be Chisaki and broke through all of the spikes. Chisaki looked at Mirio in surprise considering the sudden boost in strength and speed Mirio presented. He didn't know where it came from at first, but then he started to connect the dots a little. I see. So you're the one with One for All. Mirio's eyes widened in surprise. Not only did he know about One for All, but the voice that came out of his mouth sounded nothing like Chisaki. What was this right now? Before he could think any further, a red axe-shaped weapon of the sort shot out at Mirio. He dodged it and looked back to get a better look at it. This couldn't be Chisaki's doing. Unfortunately, he made a grave mistake of looking back as he was then stabbed by several claws. Mirio coughed up blood and looked in front of him to see who exactly did this to him. At first, he saw Overhaul, but when he looked down towards his chest, he saw that the claws were red and had a sort of inkai substance to it. The rest of Chisaki's body began to morph into something else, and in Chisaki's place was what could be described as the incarnate of the devil himself. The name's Carnage. I would say it's nice to meet you, but I don't want to make a habit of lying. Oh, who am I kidding? It's a pleasure to meet you, hero. Chisaki's dead. I killed him. Carnage laughed maniacally. Now, it's time for you to die. Carnage whitened his mouth in a way to make it look like he was about to bite off Mirio's head. Mirio refused to die here though. He couldn't, after all that All Might and Night Eye did for him. It would have been all for naught if he died here. Black Whip, Mirio shrieked. Lights out. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer for this video, as well as the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals. Have an amazing day.